Welcome back to Virteva's Let's Talk podcast, the show that analyzes the newest technologies in Microsoft Cloud and how to manage those technologies to help your business teams be successful. It's episode 17. My name is Scott Ledwong.
And I'm Holly Peterson.
And in this week's episode, we're going to be talking about a bunch of different stuff. I really wanted to try not to talk about Copilot this episode, but it's just unavoidable, and we'll talk about that in a sec. So before we get going, I just wanted to do a quick reminder to everyone that listens and watches the show that we want to, say thank you for all the support over the past year. We started kind of really hammering these out more and more starting in May last year. And since then, we have crossed the 3,100 view count on our YouTube page, which is fantastic. And we are also getting very close to 1,000 listens on our audio-only podcast. So thanks to everybody for helping keep the program going. And we're loving to see the great support that we've been getting and really continuing to push forward. And this year, and we talked about this a little bit at the end of the year last year, is one of my initiatives is kind of starting up this new thing called Virteva Tech Tips. Where we end up doing something like a 90-second to a 5 to a 10-minute video, keeping them a little bit shorter than the podcast and just kind of looking at different products in the Microsoft 365 stack, whether it be on the security or the modern work side, and just kind of giving you a breakdown of here's what it is, here's what it does, here's what you use it for. I put one of those out. There's actually been a few of them since our last podcast back in the middle of December around Teams Decorate Your Background feature, the differences of using kind of like the web-based Copilot and the 365-based Copilot. And then also I put one out on Monday this week, or Tuesday, for the Copilot Pro announcement, which is what we're about to talk about here. Upcoming ones that are planned is, I have been meaning to get to it, is I'm going to do kind of like a Clipchamp in 5 minutes video, which will go over Microsoft's acquisition of Clipchamp, which is a non-linear digital editing program that kind of replaced like Windows Movie Maker. It lines up nicely kind of in those spots. It's like a Canva or I'm trying to think of the other name. CapCut is the other big popular one that's out there right now.
Yeah. There's tons of them, and this is a secondary cost killer. So definitely check it out. 5 minutes is really, truly all it takes to get started with it. And if you're paying for Camtasia or those other types of, video editing tools, Clipchamp is about to be included for you in your license. So you don't need to buy that stuff anymore.
It's targeted release right now, so it may already be showing up kind of in your Office waffle. But if you have a Microsoft license, you can just go to clipchamp.com and check it out. But I'll showcase that more in the video. And spoilers, we edited quite a few of these podcasts on Clipchamp last year. Though you should see an improvement in podcast and video quality coming from us this year, as we now have more creative tools as of the first of the year. So I'm excited to run this first podcast through some of the Adobe creative stuff this year and see how much more I can really jazz the video up. Although, if you watched our video a couple of weeks ago, you did see Josh Allen pop in from the Buffalo Bills at the very beginning. So it'd be fun to start including more little fun little Easter eggs and pieces like that.
Yeah, if you're a Bills fan, you'll love this podcast.
Oh, absolutely. Especially if we keep going the way we've been going. We got a big game coming up on Monday. So there was a big announcement that happened at the beginning of this week that I don't think any of us were expecting. And Holly, we kind of talked about this in the pre-game or pre-production piece of the podcast that we usually talk about for 15 minutes, is that you weren't even aware of it. And
I had no idea. You were like, we got to talk about this Copilot announcement. And I'm like, what announcement? Yeah. So it is true. I mean, I think it just goes to show, even if you are, you're paying close attention, sometimes things can fly under the radar. But so I'm going to be enlightened with all of our viewers and listeners today.
Yeah. So about, I think, 2:00 Eastern time, Microsoft put a post out there on the 15th that basically said that they are prepared to bring Copilot to more people and businesses. And initially, kind of when I heard it, I was like, oh, they're probably going to start opening up the pipe to small and medium businesses, which that is part of the announcement, but it's two pieces. Okay. So the first part of the announcement is that we talked about this a couple of weeks ago on the podcast about why didn't they rename Bing Chat Enterprise to Copilot Pro, which sounded like it was going to happen, and then they decided not to do it. Well, the reason why they decided not to do it was because there actually is a product called Copilot Pro, and that is the consumer version of Copilot. So if you have a Microsoft 365 family or personal account, you now have the ability to add a subscription onto that where you will get access to Copilot in pretty much all the different Office apps that are out there. So Word, PowerPoint, Excel, OneNote. OneNote that you don't get access to is you don't get access to Teams. So that was one of the early questions that I kind of got is like, oh, if I use a personal or like the free version of Teams, will I get access to that? And the answer is no. So you get the major kind of Microsoft apps. Outlook's included in that as well.
Yeah.
Obviously, the newer version of Outlook, which is another show topic for today. You'll get that, and then really it works across Mac, PC. It also works across, I believe that there's going to be some integration with some of the Copilot apps that recently just came out on Android phones and iPhones as well. On top of that, you're also going to get priority access to the latest models of GPT-4 Turbo, which essentially means that everybody gets access to that. But if there are peak times where everyone's trying to use it, you'll get slowed down if you're not paying for it. But if you are paying for it, you basically get yourself put in the fast lane. It's like what a lot of different states do with, if you pay the extra money, they'll let you drive like in the shoulder during like rush hour traffic or something like that, as long as there's not an accident or something.
Yeah.
So on top of that, you will also get the ability to, and I should also note too that this will likely tie into Copilot on Windows 11 and in the future here, Windows 10 as well.
Yep.
So if you have that, you'll be able to link that up and use it in the same spot by invoking it with, I think it's the Windows C key.
Oh, there's going to be a Copilot key coming soon on keyboards as well. I know that.
That was one of the first things.
That's one announcement I didn't miss.
Yeah, that was one of the first things I saw when I came back from break, is that they were putting a Copilot key onto keyboards. I think that they may have already started doing it, but the big push, and this is a whole nother topic, is the new NPUs that'll be shipping on laptops later this year, probably around like springtime, to prepare for onboard AI. And that's not something that anyone needs to worry about now. And we will talk about that in the future because it's going to be a big thing, especially for an OS upgrade standpoint for pre-existing devices and new devices. But we'll talk about that on a future show. There is plenty of information out there that you can look up on that right now. I think Windows Central has a pretty good article on it that I read. So continuing along the lines of Copilot Pro, they're also saying that as part of that Copilot Pro license for prosumers is you'll be able to get enhanced AI image creation with the image creator from Designer, which again, if you watched the last show, we made Funko Pops on the show and that was super fun. So you'll get access to that stuff. And then this is the newest feature, and they talked a little bit about this at Ignite, the ability to build your own Copilot GPTs, which if you're familiar with what OpenAI is doing right now, is anybody can build their own kind of like OpenAI GPT right now, and essentially think of that as like you're building plugins and chatbots and stuff like that. I don't necessarily know what the use cases for a prosumer are to be building their own GPTs, but I'm sure we will see in the months to come.
Could be.
So the next part of the announcement, and this is the huge part for us, is because if you haven't noticed, we've been just a tiny bit jaded on the show about the inability for smaller companies to be able to get their hands on Copilot. And the big change here is it was previously locked at you needed an enterprise agreement, you needed to be an E3 or an E5 customer, and you needed to buy at least 300 seats. The big change here is it's now generally available for small businesses with Microsoft Business Premium and Standard, and you only need to buy one seat. You can buy more seats, obviously, but that 300 seat minimum purchase has been removed. It is now also available to Office 365 E3 and E5 customers, so you no longer need Microsoft 365 E3 or E5. So really, the floodgates are opened at this point. I have not had a whole lot of time to kind of dip out there onto the different community forums to see how it's reacting and what the struggles may be. I'm sure we'll hear more about it over the coming days. The assumption would be is that they would not have done this if they did not feel that they were ready to increase the volume of people using Copilot. I know, Holly, you were talking before the show about how you're going to be getting yourself your own license. I am in the
Yep,
process of
100%.
acquiring a license for myself as well through Virteva. Uh, Super excited. Like I build a lot of advisory service
Yeah,
content for us, and I have basically just been screenshotting videos and then including those in presentations because I have no access. So I'm very excited that I'm going to have the ability to play around with it and use it in live
yeah,
demos and actually be able to give good, candid feedback of how it works for me,
right.
likely in the next show.
Well, and I have some customers right off the
Yep.
bat, after we had our discussion earlier, I'm kind of keeping a little tally on my fingers of like, I gotta reach out to this group and reach out to this group because that 300 seat minimum was a huge barrier to entry for people that were genuinely excited to have access to
Yep.
it. So now I, they may already know, maybe I'm the person living under the rock, but I'm hopeful that they're now going to acquire those licenses rather than trying to use other tools.
Yeah,
So that's
we
pretty cool.
we actually internally, I had a call, I think it was on Thursday or Friday last week, and we were sitting down and we were talking to one of our resources that works for an organization in the New York area. And they have,
Hmm.
for the past like 3 or 4 weeks, been going through internal demos with Microsoft, trying to pitch them on doing a preview or a pilot of it internally at their organization. And
Yeah.
it sounded like, and I don't want to necessarily throw any shade on this, but it sounded like they weren't necessarily biting what Microsoft was selling yet
Hmm.
because, the minimum seat purchase and it's a lot to take on. Like we've talked about this on the show before.
It's a
You're talking
lot.
about,
It's a huge
yeah, you're
expense.
talking about what? About just $360 per user, and you're talking about that at 300 users, and then you're talking about the cost of a
Hmm.
year, and you're talking about 10 grand on top of the other licensing that was
Yeah.
needed for this. And just as an FYI too, you still do need those other pieces of licensing to make this work because
Yes.
you can't buy Copilot and
And
then
it
not
doesn't
have an
cost
Office
less.
license to actually use the apps. So it is still
Yeah. Yeah.
expensive. It's just not as prohibitively expensive anymore. And I'm
100%.
really excited to hear all kind of the different user stories that are going to come out of this over the following weeks
Right.
because there's a lot of potential here. And we talked about this, I believe, on the show before. Is 2 years ago, the big thing was the metaverse. And then before that, or after that, it was NFTs. And now this past year, it
Yeah.
was generative AI. And it really kind of came into is generative AI, is this Copilot stuff, is it just going to be the next thing that kind of fades into the background? Or is it
Right.
going to be, hey, we need to actually consider this? It may be as game changing
Right.
as they're making it out to be.
Right.
And
Well, and I think everyone needs to experience, like, we now have a much better way for people to experience it themselves, and not just make purchases based on perfect world
yep,
demos. I go back to a lot of, when I watch Microsoft demos of Copilot in Office, and it's like, take these meeting notes and turn it into a document, or turn this document into slides. And I always say, I've encountered a lot of documents and notes in my life that wouldn't I would love to see what Copilot would actually do with some of those things. We see that sometimes we use these tools and it gets it really right, and sometimes it gets it really
yep,
wrong. And I'm personally, I'm just excited that more of us are going to be able to test these tools out and not just have to rely on the
yeah.
pitch, and the perfect world
I mean, I've
demos.
already got my perfect use cases. We have a kickoff coming with a customer here soon, and we have a statement of work for them. And what I want to do is I want to take that statement of work and I want to at where the file is and say, build me a 5 slide kickoff presentation for this customer, and I want to see what it does. I don't necessarily know if I
Yeah,
will end up using the end result of it, but I want to see how well it actually does that because I feel like that's one of the demo
exactly.
cases that they've been giving on it.
Right. 100. That's completely right. And not all of those types of documents are created
Yep.
equal. But I could see it. So remember, for those of you that are going to get your hands on this, that now the barrier to entry is removed. You can use it. Just keep in mind that it's not going to do everything for you. It's probably going to give you a great, hopefully, first draft, maybe even a second draft. But you're still going to have to intervene, I believe, quite a bit. But, if previously it would take you, let's say, a couple hours to build a deck off of a statement of work, that could be done in minutes, seconds.
As Nadala has said on many occasions, it is Copilot. It is not autopilot. He probably thinks these things up as he is springboarding off of his diving board into his pool of gold coins, just like Scrooge McDuck.
They're the most valuable company
they are.
Now,
They're
right?
huge.
Didn't
they overtook Apple on
Apple
Friday last week. And I mean, I don't think there's any surprise there because while Apple, I think, is playing around with, so they don't call it augmented reality or virtual reality. They call it spatial reality, I think.
Yeah, the Vision Pro,
which you can buy now. It's not actually out yet, but you can actually put your pre-orders in if you want to spend $3,500 on a headset.
I've had to, basically, my husband has basically told me, like, complain all you want, but I'm getting one.
Oh, really? He's going to be an early adopter on Gen 1.
Oh, yeah. Or I don't know if he'll buy the first generation. I have no idea. But man, he is the poster boy for every time Apple throws a shiny object out at the world.
Yeah.
He always says he's not going to get it, but guess what? He always does.
Admittedly, I was one of those people when the first iPhone came out, is I ran out and I got the iPhone 2G, and then I had a 3G, and I had a 4 and a 5 and a 6 and a 7. And then I stepped in the Android world for about 10 years, and I very much enjoyed my time there, but I finally am back on a 15 Pro now. And I think a big piece of that is that Apple ecosystem is I got a MacBook Pro. I had AirPods that I was using with my Android phone because I had like a third-party app to help use that. And it just started coming down to I should probably just get an iPhone again. You do kind of
pick a side of the fence. It always feels like, at least in your consumer life.
USB-C was the big thing that drew me back. As soon as they put that on, I was like, all right, well, I can go back now because I only want one charger. So thank you, European Union, on making that happen.
Yes. Oh my gosh. USB-C is, yes. Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you.
So I put up I put up a quick graphic on the screen just to kind of highlight the differences between Copilot, Copilot Pro, and then Copilot for 365. So the first two are for individuals, and we talked about this on the show last time. This was a big focus, is that free version of Copilot is for the foundational web-based pieces of it. If you do have business licensing, you also get the commercial data protection with it. If not, it's just you get the web grounding and the foundational capabilities. Now, if you go with the prosumer model, which is Copilot Pro, $20 a month, you get access to, you get access to commercial data protection, which I don't know what kind of commercial data protection you're getting with your free account, but you're getting some level of additional security tossed on it. You're getting priority model access, which this is like one of those line items that I feel like that they put in just to make the chart a little bit more deep. And then you get Copilot in Outlook, Word, Excel, PowerPoint, and OneNote. You do not get it in Teams, so remember that.
Right, and that's, I think, one of the things we're going to see a lot more is this sort of like carve-outs of premium licensing within an application, especially something like Teams. But, we're going to see it in Planner. We're going to see it, there's going to be app level premium licensing that has to be a bolt-on.
So one other big call out too. So two more call outs really on just Copilot Pro. So you notice it says for individuals up at the top. It's $20 per individual. Now, if you have a family plan, and I've read through the lines on these, if you have a family plan and you have 5 people on your family, then you're talking about Copilot. If everybody wants to use Copilot Pro, you need a separate license for each family member. So that can get prohibitively expensive. So I don't think that you'll probably be buying it for everyone in your family if you had that many people on that plan. Unless, maybe they're going to contribute $20 to the bill on a monthly. It's like when you buy your kid a cell phone, you're like, oh, you're going to pay half of this, and then they do for the first month and then never again. But just keep that in mind if you have a family plan, because that can get pretty expensive pretty quickly at $20 a month. The last thing I want to talk about was the difference between, so with Copilot Pro, you get access to Copilot GPT Builder. With Copilot for organizations, you get access to Copilot Studio, and that is kind of its own different type of beast. This is Copilot Studio is, I feel like it's kind of in a preview right now, because a lot of the stuff, if you go to, and I'll actually, let's see if I can do this on the fly here. Studio, it's probably Copilot Studio.
Yeah.
.microsoft.com. So if this actually lets me open up, I'm in my demo tenant right now. So forgive while it's loading. Last time I looked at this, there was quite a bit of stuff that was in preview still. It says that you have to start a free trial. This is going to be very similar to the Power Platform, in which it is going to end up telling you that, hey, this is going to be a lot of kind of like pay as you go type stuff. And don't get caught off guard by this. Okay, so it actually opened up here. Is depending on what data sources you're connecting to and what you're using and how many people are interacting with this, is going to be very similar to Power Virtual Agents, which ironically is exactly what it replaced, in that it can get out of hand if you're not careful with it. So that is something that as an enterprise, if you're using this, you want to keep in mind. I actually built my own Copilot assistant in here, and throughout the process of me building it, and let me turn off my dark mode add-on so it's a little bit easier to see, I connected to the Minnesota government portal where I could ask it a question. So who is the governor of Minnesota? Cue obligatory Joe Biden, Minnesota gif here.
Tennessee, Oklahoma, Arkansas, Minnesota.
So I built this and I pointed it at the Minnesota government website, and through the website, it actually referenced the webpage, and it told me that the current governor of Minnesota is Tim Walz. Now, is that true? Holly, maybe you can tell me.
It's true.
It's true. So it got it right. Now, in my testing with this, I had a lot of problems with it actually not being able to pull from the data, not being able to pull from different data sets. You can add files into it. You can even manage some additional generative AI functions with it. It is a cool tool, but again, this can be a cost prohibitive tool. Know what you're getting into. You can also extend some of these plugins into Microsoft 365 Copilot and get analytics through it. But a lot of the stuff that's in here when I was playing with it before the break was very much still in preview and not quite ready yet. But if you do want to play with it and learn a little bit more about it, those features are there. And I never really built a whole lot on Power Virtual Agents. The couple times that I tried, it seemed kind of clunky. This seemed easier to use, and I think that this is going to be the future of that piece of the Power Platform.
I can imagine that. I think I did some work with Power Virtual Agents. Microsoft had some in GitHub where, you could basically seed, questions and answer. But that was sort of this, there was always that sad moment where a customer thought it was going to be like AI, but you pull back the curtain and it's like, no, you program all of the questions,
all the
keywords,
the
buzzwords, and you program in all the answers. And, a lot of limitations, right? If it doesn't know what question you're asking, it doesn't have a reference point, it's going to be like, I don't know. So generative AI actually has, I think, that easy button sense, or that kind of fuzzy logic and things that it can use and utilize. But I think you're absolutely right. When you are saying we want to point this at a certain data source, those large language the language learning model, all those sorts of things, they're only as good as what you're kind of feeding into it. And if it can't read a certain data, if you can't get the, pull stuff in, it's just not going to be, the wow factor goes down.
I mean, this is something that you're going to build a website and then you're going to put like a little button on the front of your website and it's going to say, hey, help me do this stuff. Or, hey, I have these general questions. Can you help me? Like the previous iteration of this, whether it was Power Platform or another service, was always, hi, can you tell me what the store's hours are? And then the chatbot will go ... and it will go, no.
Unless you specifically programmed that question or keyword to pull from a pre-programmed answer. So that's kind of one of those things where this is going to have a little bit more flexibility. It's probably a little less intensive to set up than Power Virtual Agents, but still kind of the premise is there. It's really only going to be as good as what it can pull from.
The premise of Power Platform and Power Virtual Agents in general has always been it's a low code, no code platform. And I feel like yeah, it was low code to kind of add a couple of blocks and stuff like that around. But at the end of the day,
Yep.
you did probably need to know some code or know someone that knew that could push it the rest of the way. This, I feel like, is
Right.
going to be that this is the next logical step. And I
Yeah.
think that organizations will end up getting more out of this in the long run. Again, you just have to keep in mind that you're going to have to understand the pay-as-you-go model to this so that you're not getting a bill 3 months after you roll out a tool. You're like, what?
Yeah, 100%. Like this, one of the things to keep in mind, and you talked about this with this sort of like, usage priority, is these tools are still extremely, they're process heavy.
Yep.
It takes a lot of power to run generative AI. And, Microsoft kind of, I felt it previously put up a lot of barriers to that just to almost shield themselves from the type of demand that they were going to have to be ready to support. They're making the decision saying, hey, we're ready to support it no matter how many people want to use this. Again, they're not lowering the price, but they're basically saying, okay, we don't have to just only let a company buy 300
Yep.
seats. We could maybe open it up to onesies and twosies. So it does remain to be seen. But I think when you build your own AI, the pay-as-you-go model makes sense because some companies might not see a ton of usage and others might have a lot. And if you're using all that power, you got to pay for it.
Yeah. And not to confuse, so there's two different versions of this as well. There's Copilot Studio version of it. And then there is the
Yep.
Azure AI Studio piece of it, which is going to be a little bit different. So they
Okay.
did a great demo of this on stage at Ignite, is if you are a large sales organization and you want to put a chatbot on your chatbot on your website that's going to be able to reference your internal databases and pull down stuff and search with pictures, that's going to be the right
Yeah.
solution for that. This is going to be more of a, hey, I just need to get some basic answers out of a chatbot thing. Not to say that Azure Studio's version of this couldn't do that. Just it's a little bit different in use case, but
I would say, yeah, that's more internal. I mean,
Yep.
I get that's more like your private data.
I saw a neat demo of, I forget the gentleman's name, but he took his shoe off on stage and took a photo of it, and then the AI basically identified the shoe, and then it found it in the database and actually said what it was and how much it cost. I was like, that's actually really cool. Though you could
love it.
argue that Google Lens has been doing that for 5 years. All right. So I wanted to jump into the next section. I kind of popped it up here real quick. Just the adoption website.
Yep.
So if you want to learn more about Copilot, the Microsoft adoption website, and we always try to include these links in the show notes, and we'll have chapter notes as well. This is a great spot to learn about all the different solutions that are out there and how to prepare for them. You generally call out kind of like the biggest ones in the center of the page, but if you do scroll all the way up to the top and you go to products and solutions, you will see all the different products and solutions, and you can even see that there's a little kind of like new tags in there to let you know what's coming.
Yep.
That being said, so Microsoft Planner had a new tag on here. I clicked on it because I want to learn more about the new planner and get some screenshots and update some of my stuff. There's literally nothing here yet.
Not yet.
You can go to aka.ms/the new planner, but I have a pretty good feeling that when I click this link, it's just going to take me, it took me to an article that I already know that exists. So there's a planner refresh coming in the spring to prepare for, but
Good one.
when it comes to Copilot and everything else that's coming out, these are great references. Which kind of is our segue into the next topic, is we are going to be talking about the new of Microsoft Outlook, which came out earlier in preview in 2023. I believe it started coming out in like May. And this is full feature release on Windows right now, Windows 11 and Windows 10, I believe. It replaced the old mail and calendar app. But it is coming to businesses, and there has been quite a bit of noise about how people are extremely resistant and they don't want to move away from that 25-year-old app. And there's quite a bit of information out there, and we'll talk a little bit about, so kind of looking at it, I'm going to play the YouTube video here, but I'll mute it. The big thing is it looks very similar to the web version of Outlook. And I think that this is what scares the pants off people the most, is because that has generally not been super well received in the past. Though I will say, if you look at it, go ahead. Sorry.
No, will say agree. I would even say if you have an E3 or an E5 license for Office and you don't integrate the portal into your day-to-day work, you're not going out to Outlook on the web very often, this is a shocking change. But for those people that do use Outlook on the web regularly, you'll definitely recognize the new Outlook, but it doesn't mean that you necessarily love it.
Yeah. So the big changes are visually, it looks starkly different than the version of Office that we've been using for years and years. Because really all that's gotten is very slight kind of polish and paint updates. But the purpose, so we talked about this with Teams and the new Teams, is the purpose of this is Microsoft is, you can't blame them, sick of developing 4 or 5 different versions of the same app. And by moving to these kind of like WebView 2 apps where they're essentially just containerized web applications, is they develop for one and it just goes across the board, across all the different apps that are out there. So you're going to see streamlined email and calendars. You're going to be able to write emails with AI, though they have caved and said that they are going to bring Copilot to the classic version of Outlook.
Yes.
It connects more seamlessly to Microsoft 365 apps. I think that the classic version of Outlook has started doing a better job of this, but this is just going to do it more natively again because it's just OneDrive is a web app. SharePoint is a web app. So all that stuff ties in together. One of the things early on that I actually was a little resistant on is when they started integrating To Do into the new Outlook, because I think that they did not knock that out of the park at all. And I'm a big To Do fan and I'm a big Planner fan as well. But that has been getting better over time. Calendar syncing, I think, is going to get better. I think with the new Teams as well. So like if I send you a meeting invite, whether it's through Teams or through Outlook, it goes to Exchange, it hits Outlook, and then a sync happens after the fact, and it would update in the old version of Teams. So with everything moving to kind of like this new world, is you won't have that as much anymore, and everything will be more kind of instantaneous. And I don't think that it's quite there yet, but these things are starting to tie more closely together, which is nice.
Right.
So just kind of going through this. So this is actually one of the features that I love about the new Outlook is the ability. So typically in the past, what you do is if you want to manage your emails, that was a quick video. Typically what you do is if you want to manage, let me see if I can kind of click back on this here and pause, is everyone, you have 2 ways of doing it. Most people do, at least. You just never unmark your email as read. And you just let it float in your inbox, or you flag it and you come back to it. Well, with the new Outlook, you have the ability to pin messages, which is very helpful because then they just sit at the top of the list and they remind you that you need to get back to it. I do not advocate for pinning every single message in your inbox because that will get out of control. I don't know. Holly, do you know if there is a limit on the number of pins? Is it 5, 10 maybe?
I don't know. I mean, I think we all have our own sort of, processing and things like that, but and I can demo some of this on screen, but the ability to snooze an email, the best. And I really do hope that tools like Sweep and Snooze and
Scheduled
things
send.
like that, just stay in the new Outlook because it's going to help people want to go use some of these better tools. If they cave every time and incorporate it into the old Outlook, people aren't going to make that leap. But I really do think it's quite nice.
Yes, quite nice. So real quick before we get into the demo, because I know everyone is thinking, well, what do I need to know? When is it coming? How do I stick my feet? How do I stick my head in the sand as deep as it'll go? Because I don't want this. And I think that your mind will get changed quite a bit as you see the demo, because things have changed considerably since this got released last year into preview. Like it is much, much further along now. I use it every day. And I very rarely swap back to the old Outlook at this point. But Microsoft released a video, and again, I'll include this in the show notes. This was 4 months ago. I think it was in the summer, with the principal group product manager, Margie Clinton, and Robert Novosky, who is the director of engineering, kind of previewing what it looks like. I think that the high level note for it that most people care about is what is the timeline like? And I've got that up on the screen right now. So the We Are Here, that was when they did this video 4 months ago. So we are further along than that, but I don't necessarily know how much further along we are. But the big takeaway from this timeline is, so right now, if you want it, it's in beta. You can opt into it. And it's as easy to do as just hitting the slider up at the top, very similar to kind of Teams, to turn it on. There is going to be a opt-out period, and that's going to be, hey, you have to go into your Microsoft 365 settings and say, don't let people turn this on. And then eventually it's going to get to the point over the next year that I think organizations will either choose to adopt early or opt out and say, we're not adopting at all. Like, we don't want this. And then what will happen is, as we get closer to 2025, is it's going to be a gentle shove to a much harder shove of, hey, this is coming and you don't have a choice, because as we get closer towards probably 2026 is the classic version of Outlook will likely retire. And there's a lot of reasons for the retirement. And I honestly, we're not going to talk about all of them on the show today, but I do recommend you check out the extra YouTube video comment that I'll leave in there on the Microsoft version of this. But it's just deprecation of COM add-ons, things that don't work well anymore. They're constantly patching and trying to, every time they fix a bug, a new bug pops up in the old version. So again, they're trying to develop around this stuff with a more streamlined solution for it all.
Right. And I think this is going to kind of lead into some of the conversations that we have on licensing. But one of the things that I think a lot about the new Outlook and even things like OneNote in Windows, the Windows version of OneNote versus the 2016 installed version is this sort of, they're really, really trying hard to lift us off prem, get things into the cloud, get our settings into the cloud, get rid of on-premise-y type capabilities, or basically helping us not make bad decisions with lots of little files and underpinnings in these applications. So you're going to see, I would say Outlook won't be the last.
Yeah, Copilot doesn't talk to on-prem data.
Exactly.
There are connectors that they are building, but I think that those connectors are more intended for external data sources that aren't on-prem. So it's like in another cloud. So if you want to integrate Copilot with like your HIRS system or something like that, that might be an Oracle or maybe a NetSuite or maybe a Workday, like that stuff
for sure
is top of mind for Microsoft. But on-prem data, they want you to get that stuff in the SharePoint. They want you to get it in the OneDrive. And again, and we're going to talk about this at the end of the show, Holly, when we talk about licensing and F-level licensing, which is a huge passion point for you right now, is those license levels specifically are limited when it comes to talking to that type of data. But let's continue on with Outlook. And Holly, let me give you a minute to get set up here and a minute for me to get set up here. And then we will we'll jump back in on that stuff. So we'll be right back after this break. All right, and we're back. So Holly, I'm going to pass you presentation mode here, and then we can take a look.
There's kind of a couple of things that so if you see that try the new Outlook switch, it's going to be in the upper right-hand corner of your screen in Outlook. If you switch that, it may seem like it's doing a lot of stuff. It's making a bunch of big changes. Like, don't worry, it's just basically getting you access to this iframe or this kind of contained web app. But essentially what you're going to see, if you've already used Outlook on the web in the past, is you're going to see basically Outlook on the web. And you might wonder, well, this is just Outlook on the web. And the answer is, basically it is. So one of the things that you're going to notice, and you're going to see this throughout a lot of these sort of Microsoft 365 applications, things like Teams, all that stuff, is this left-hand navigation is expanded. It includes views of To-Do. It includes views of OneDrive. You can add additional apps into that left-hand navigation. So if you're someone who spends quite amount of time in your Outlook window, you can Teams it up a little bit and make it so that it becomes this a much, much more useful window for you. So you could include peeks into Viva Engage, things like that. So you just have all those apps pinned and you can switch seamlessly between them. One of the things you're also going to notice is the visual changes and sort of almost like a shrinking of how many tabs you have on your ribbon. And you're going to see this sort of simplified view. This is currently what you see in Outlook on the web. We're going to switch over to the new Outlook in just a moment, but you'll notice all these kind of that more simplified buttons, I think represents a couple things, just what we were talking about. So one, these are the most commonly used features and functions in Outlook, and there are in the full installed version that some of us currently have, there's a lot more. There's some really esoteric stuff. There are features and functions that have existed since the dawn of Outlook that get baked into every new version, even though they aren't very, very commonly used. So those sorts of things, you're going to see a step away from some of those. But in addition, in their absence, where that, maybe little template-sized void in your heart are going to be filled with things like sweep, things like snooze, as Scott mentioned, the ability to sort of do some hover kind of mail processing here. And it represents what a majority of us use in Outlook at any given time. Some of the bigger changes, and I'm going to switch to calendar and then we'll switch over to the new Outlook. The calendar in the new Outlook, again, looks and walks and talks a lot like, and I'm going to switch us over to work week, is like Outlook on the web. And this is where we have a lot of, and I'll talk about this in just a moment, but I'm just going to double click on my calendar here. The new format and the new look and feel of a calendar invite is really different.
Yep.
And this can be a big stumbling point in adoption. I feel like people can kind of get over what's happening in your inbox, your mail. The calendar changes can be a little bit jarring for some folks because they've definitely moved things around, simplified those toolbars. You're looking for the scheduling assistant is going to look a little bit different than you're used to seeing.
Yep.
And you have some new views and functions that are actually very, very handy. But it looks different and it can be a little bit jarring for people. But just wanted to give you a kind of look at it before we look and see just how identical it is.
Yeah,
to
and
the
if
new
you have
Outlook. Go ahead,
if
Scott.
you have a keen eye for it as well, you'll notice that the new scheduling piece in both the web version and the new version of Outlook looks very, very close to what you have in Teams today when you set up a meeting. And there's a reason for that.
Yep.
And it's because it's all running off that same kind of back-end scheduling system. So Holly, I'll let you switch over when you're ready.
Yeah, I'll switch over to the new Outlook, and we'll see. Now, again, hopefully everyone's remembering how the other one looked, and then we'll take a look at this screen.
All right, you are good to go.
All right. So here I am in the new Outlook. So why did I show the web Outlook first? Of course, just to reiterate, it's because it's a virtually identical experience. So here I am in the new Outlook. I've switched my toggle button over into using the new Outlook. If this seems too scary for you, if you are someone where your organization has turned this toggle off, it's not visible to you yet, go to Outlook on the web. If you want to understand what the new Outlook experience is going to be, use your mailbox online because that's the experience. There's going to be things that you like. There's going to be things that you don't like because I really will say it's not that it's bad, it's just different. It's not what we're used to.
And
so
I'm going to anger every help desk out here right now by saying, be the squeaky wheel. If you want to try it out, try and put a ticket in and see if they will create a group specifically for you in the Microsoft Admin Center. This can help you be a champion in your organization for promoting and trying this out and getting used to it before everyone else adopts, and then you can kind of be that go-to person. I mean, from an IT perspective, is we look for people like this all the time to be those initial champions and adopters because it helps us train the users later on.
Right.
But yeah,
and this is an
these are things that you can
change.
Certainly do through Microsoft 365 is you can set up groups to target that kind of stuff.
Microsoft can hedge on these changes. I don't want to, overcommit them. They sometimes, they get a lot of pushback. We've seen it with OneNote, but be ready. Don't be caught off guard by this change. When Microsoft starts letting us opt out of it, it's going to be a big deal for people.
Yep.
So here I am in the new Outlook. So it really does look just like what we were looking at. We have this new expanded left navigation. integrates things like to do and all of those things. So you're not going to see some of those traditional type navigation items. You're going to see an expanded view. You have that simplified ribbon, so kind of more simple things. And you're going to see some new stuff like snooze, sweep, things that have been around in the web for a while now, but
Holly,
if you
what
haven't
does
used the
sweep
web
do?
version.
I
Okay,
straight up just I do not know what sweep does.
I love sweep. So sweep is one of those things that sits a little bit between mailbox cleanup, rules, and like focused inbox. So sweep, so let's say I get this Microsoft Power Automate newsletter
Mhm.
and I like to read it, but they pile up in my mailbox. So I can click on sweep and it basically says always keep the latest message and then move the rest from the inbox folder to the deleted items. So it's like it's a more complex rule, but it allows us to have some flexibility over like what we're doing with messages. So it always gets rid of the old ones and lets us keep the newest one. It allows us to say take everything in the inbox and all future messages and move it here. So it's just this sweep rule. This particular one, always keep the latest message and move the rest from the inbox folder. Sometimes we were doing things like that with like quick actions. I think those like quick action buttons.
Mhm.
And now it's just sort of pre-programmed in there. So it's a great tool. I really like it.
Mm.
So here, this one, always move messages older than 10 days. So again,
I like
depending
that.
on those like ServiceNow alerts, hey, don't just put them in your junk. Don't just delete them all. Keep them, look at them. But we know in the ServiceNow world, they pile up. So just like let there be kind of a natural falling off of those
Do you have
things.
the ability to configure some of those settings for sweep, or is it just, hey, this is out of the box
I think
what it
it's going to
is?
be more of an out of the box thing. If you wanted to get into some more complexities, you probably could build
Build a rule.
a more complex
Yeah.
rule. But I know I've seen some people, and we're just going to go into settings because I want to talk about some of the new settings that you have available to them. But these are some different things that you can kind of like. Do you see it? It's not letting me configure it. It's just on or off. And sweep is a distinct area outside of rules. So it's not like a part of it potentially. So one of the other things, and some of our viewers and listeners have noticed that if you have Microsoft 365, we're storing settings in the cloud now. So you may have gotten notifications, things like that, that your signature is now stored in the cloud. And this is another little thing that Microsoft is working to get us off premises, out of our local drive and into the cloud so that no matter where we're using Outlook, we have our signature. So it's little things like that that we're going to see. And one of the other kind of expanded features here, and this is something that I love. I was just showing this off the other day. In calendar and work hours and locations, you can now set up a more flexible work location, locale. So if I work Mondays, I work half days in the office and half days remote at home, or I work a hybrid schedule. I'm in the office 3 days and at home 2. I can set that up. And traditionally in Outlook, you set your weekly schedule. It assumed that all of us work the same hours every day.
Mhm.
Whereas we know we've worked, especially in like our service desk organization, we have people that maybe work different shifts. They'll work split shifts, they'll do different things. And you can now configure that here in Outlook. And this talks to Teams as well. So, you're kind of setting up your contact card. But my hope is that we're kind of showing you like the new Outlook is really the old web Outlook.
Yep.
It's out there. It's available for you to try. So if you don't see this toggle switch, try using your Outlook, your Outlook online. So try using your mailbox online, because if you can get used to using these features and functions, these expanded settings, some of the expanded feature sets, the look and the feel, you're going to be that much more prepared. And I will echo what you said, Scott. Put in a ticket, ask to be given the preview, because there are times where we see organizations get caught off guard, get a little too close to the cliff, and have to scramble and figure out how do we get hundreds of people ready to use this new version of Outlook. And we're here kind of saying try and adopt early, and there's a couple of ways you can do it. So you can get access, you can turn on the toggle button, you can always turn it back off if you need to, but try it there. Go use your inbox online for a week, see what you think. There's going to be definite things that you discover, and especially things relevant to your department or your organization, and you're going to be poised to be that champion. We need you champions. So definitely check it out.
Do you want to do a quick demo of what opening up, like sending a new email message would look like? Because I know that this is a little bit different than the kind of the classic version, but it's not really too much different, right?
It's really not. So we're kind of used to this kind of the compose window overlay. This is a setting you can change. So if you want all of your new emails to pop out into their own window, you can totally do that.
Mm-hmm.
But one of the things I'm going to pop this out. Oh, actually, I shouldn't do that because I'm only sharing this one window, but I'll just leave it here. So we'll do a new email, and you're going to see once you get into the message body. So don't be alarmed if you're here and you see all these buttons grayed out. Don't worry. Once you're in the body of the message, you're going to see kind of your same, your message tab, your insert tab. You can format your text. You've got some different options, but you're just going to see a few more expanded options. Again, I always like to say this is kind of the buttons look different situation. They really haven't taken a lot away. They've definitely given you some new stuff, but it's gonna.
I think that one of the biggest changes, especially since this is web, is the ability to use slash commands now directly within. And yes. I think that that's something that an everyday user wouldn't necessarily think about using, but just being able to type slash, and then it gives you kind of contextual menus to insert files, or this is a way that you'll use Copilot as well, and just get those in. And one of the things too that the new Outlook does is by default is it is going to try and grab from SharePoint or OneDrive. It is not going to by default try to attach physical documents, which if you're in the habit of doing, which I think many people are, you should actually try and get away from that as you start to move to more of a cloud-based world.
Yeah.
Just due to the amount of space that it takes up, especially on calendars when you're doing cached information in Outlook. So if you're caching 90 days or a year's worth of data, in every single meeting invite that you get has a 2, 3, 4 megabyte attachment on it, that builds up over time, and it builds up your overall kind of like cached app data on the computer. And not a lot of us are always in problems of running out of space, but especially if you're talking about just smaller dedicated VMs or even kind of a dynamic like pooled VMs, is it takes longer to load your profile because you're bringing more of that app data down with it.
Yeah, and I would say in the work world, and again, this leads into our licensing conversation, we're so like everything is a document, everything is a file, and Microsoft 365 is looking to expand your horizons and help you not make everything a Word document or an Excel spreadsheet. There's lots and lots and lots of additional tools that you can use that don't really have a file at all. Things like forms, things like these scheduling polls, OneNote, in a team, your team notebook. So rather than, attaching last week's meeting minutes to every meeting invite you do, all that stuff, there are better solutions, more cloud forward solutions that aren't always these files. We still traffic so much in files, and we really need to start thinking about like, when is this thing that I have doesn't really need to be a Word document, doesn't really need to be an Excel spreadsheet. It could be a whiteboard. It could be a page in a notebook.
Those
are the opportunities that we all need to be sourcing.
One other note too, and I get this question quite a bit when I see new people adopt Outlook, is there are theming options to it very similar to the classic version. So Holly, if you wanted to go up to settings real quick and go to kind of the theming area, is I think that it's important to bring up one aspect of how the themes work. Oh, and I wonder if I'm not going to be able to see it.
Yep.
I can slide some screenshots in, but one of the important things from the theming option here is, Holly, we may see it in real time, but if you choose one of those bottom options on themes where it has like the flower print or like the moving arm cat toy, you'll see that kind of change at the top where it's blue right now, kind of in almost like that area above the ribbon bar. But the other area you will also see it change is across every web app you use. So if you go to portal.office.com or you go to SharePoint or OneDrive, you'll see that update. And some people don't like that. Like they just want it to be an Outlook. So yeah, I can see the Lego blocks up there right now. So
Yep.
if you went somewhere else in the Microsoft world, you would see that change on your portal. And that's not always for everyone. So I just like to kind of let people know that may happen.
100%. 100%.
Yep.
But this is one of those things where it's good. Like you're going to start to see just the interconnectedness. You know, each app isn't a silo unto itself.
Mm-hmm.
It's sort of all referencing each other. So again, Engage, OneDrive, those sorts of things. They have their own unique site. They have their own unique location. But when you using them under your account, because we can store your settings in the cloud, we can, you can reference those applications wherever you are. Yeah, you're going to see those changes.
Okay. Holly, anything else on the new Outlook other than just, adopt, try it out. If you don't like it, you can always go back.
I really think it's not scary. It's just very different. It looks different. There's some new features there, but I just kind of go back to, there was a time when Teams didn't exist. And, that was a much scarier learning curve. Yep. Outlook is still Outlook. It's still Outlook. It's still your email. You can still have your folders. It's in a kind of an updated wrapper. Yep. My hope is that all of those calls that we would get to like the service desk of my Outlook is slow, those sorts of things that is in the past, because it's a much more nimble application in this format. So my hope is that your Outlook may it always be blazing fast.
So yeah, let's take another quick break. I'm going to change kind of our presentation format here, and then we'll be right back. We're going to talk about F3 licensing and just the big differences that people don't always understand when they're trying to save a little bit of dough. So we'll be right back. All right, and we're back for our final segment. So the final segment of the show today, and hopefully Holly doesn't go too far off the deep end on this. I know this is a very passionate project for her because she works on a lot of different trainings. We work with a lot of different customers, and customers will often say, we're moving to the cloud. We're coming from on-premises to cloud. We need to save as much money as we possibly can. That is coming down from the executive level. And oftentimes when this conversation happens is when you're talking about information workers versus frontline workers. Those information worker licenses can be pretty expensive, $36 or $57, depending on E3 or E5. There's also, you're also distinguishing between enterprise versus business standard and premium as well.
Sure.
But F-level licensing is great for frontline workers, but it comes with caveats. And I am going to flip over here and do a quick share. And again, I'll put this link in the show notes just so you can kind of see the difference. So the page I'm on right now is the Microsoft Enterprise License Agreement page. That basically just kind of breaks everything down across whether you're using Microsoft 365, Office 365, Frontline, Government, Nonprofit. And you can kind of click on these tabs and it will give you a little bit of a different view of what that looks like. And when you're talking about frontline workers, often what you're usually looking at is F1 or F3 licenses. But for the purpose of this is I kind of want to show you everything, because this is where most people kind of like, they bat their eyes and are like, $36, $57 or $8. $8 sounds like a lot less money than
$8?
$36. And this can be very deceiving, because if you look from E3 to E5 to F3 and you're scrolling through this page, is you will notice that, well, most of the stuff is the same here. So you're looking at your apps, you're looking at getting Windows, so it's everything great from E3 plus all this additional stuff. But what a lot of people don't necessarily see is, well, one, this big bold line here is not at the top of F3 anymore. And that's what they miss. And you're not getting a terabyte of cloud storage. You're getting the security for the most part. You're getting the same kind of stuff. You're not getting that same kind of top level E5 best in class stuff, but you are getting good security with it. But most people kind of scroll right past that and they're like, well, what I care about with the frontline workers is the app. So they need to be able to get Outlook and Word and Excel, and they see all this stuff down the line and they go, oh, this is great. Like, yeah, there's a couple things missing, but no, this is fantastic. We can go right down and we're just going to purchase this for our users. But they don't continue scrolling down the page to kind of see these half filled in white check marks here. And as you kind of go through, then you start to see all these footnotes and you're like, well, what's the difference? And that's what we're going to talk about today, is what the difference is between a traditional kind of like frontline worker license and those F1 and F3 licenses. So with that being said, Holly, I'll scroll back up because I think that this is kind of like the killer view here right now, is looking at this piece. And I'll turn it over to you and let you start to go with it.
Yeah. I mean, so for those of you that know, I work in the training and adoption space, right? So I work directly with end users most of the time in projects. And we're often sort of dealing with the results of, long ago, making decisions, making purchases. And this view where you see these too expensive versus this, low cost, looks like it's the same thing. I always give the analogy of the Chromebook. So when you would walk into a Best Buy or Target or wherever you buy electronics, and you would see, can buy this $1,200 laptop, buy this $800 laptop, or I could buy this $250 laptop. Like, forget those losers buying the $800 laptop. Yep. I'm going to get this $250 laptop because I'm smart, I'm savvy, I'm going to save me some money.
Thrifty.
And then you get home and guess what? It turns out it's not a laptop. It's not a laptop. So that's kind of the way that I like to talk about the F3 license. Everyone, it's not a laptop. It's very, very different. Now, Microsoft wouldn't sell it if it didn't work for some people. So if you actually go to like the explainer page of the F3, one of the images is like, it looks like maybe it's a line worker or someone holding an iPad, right? They're maybe getting work orders. They got to respond to an email or a Teams message, but they're holding an iPad because a majority of what they do all day is not sit in front of a computer. They've got to interact with things that go downstream in your environment, but they're not, responding to 800 emails a day. They're not building presentations necessarily. They're not doing what a lot of people do, is that information work, sitting at a desk all day at a dedicated workstation. So what happens is we get in an environment where, yes, there are frontline workers. There are definitely groups in an organization that can be described as frontline. We see it a lot in manufacturing. We see it in healthcare. We see it in retail. And yes, these are frontline workers. There's a lot of people that can be dropped into that category and do okay. And then there are people in your organization that are definitely in the E3 and E5 flavor, right? We can't, they've got to have Office installed on their computer. They've got to be able, they traffic in documents, they're answering 800 emails, they're going to Teams meeting, they're doing all the stuff. But there's a swath of people that sits in the middle, and this is really where we tend to get into trouble with this. And this is where the heartache comes, because if we can stretch and bend and kind of shape and mold, like we could probably get this person to use an F3 license. We could get away with the lower license cost. However, the amount that they interface with your E3 users, your E5 users, maybe they've got to input something on a file. They've got to do just a little bit more than a frontline worker, someone that could work, let's say, from an iPad. They get it into trouble. And a lot of that comes down to cloud readiness.
Yep.
And when I say cloud readiness, in the Microsoft 365 world, what I most mean is file storage. We encounter every organization that we work with, whether they're doing a Microsoft 365 migration, whether we're doing some other type of work, they have network storage in their environment, and it is abused. So like raise your hand if you have a home drive, right? An H drive, an M drive, a P drive, a Q drive, whatever it is. That storage is really a huge barrier to success of this license.
Yep.
We're in the throes of it at all times. You may think, I want an F3 license, but I don't want we're not ready to use OneDrive. Then I have news for you. You're not ready to use F3 licensing because Scott you have an E5. I've got an E5, in other tenants, I may have an E3, whatever, but it's like, I could get that Microsoft 365 license. I get Office installed on my computer. I get huge amounts of storage in my mailbox. And the G drive, the H drive, the Elemental P drive, whatever you want to call it, that's still on my computer, and I can still click on it and use it. And I can work oblivious to the fact that I have Microsoft 365, which sucks, but it's true.
Yep.
I could just work the same way I've always worked, never click on OneDrive, never do any of that stuff. But that F3 user that I need, hey, I put that file out on the G drive. Why don't you go open it up and make your changes to it? They can't, because the F3 license can only practically, in a practical way, can only talk to OneDrive, SharePoint / Teams.
Yep.
That's like the only place you can keep files for those people. So unless your entire organization is ready to use OneDrive, is ready to use SharePoint, then that's going to work for you. You can have that group of people that are on the bubble, like, we can do this, right? But it means everyone in the organization has to be ready to use Teams, ready to use SharePoint, ready to use OneDrive. Because when you lift half your organization up and say they have to use the cloud,
yep.
But then we have another half of our organization that can literally work oblivious to the fact that they have access to the Microsoft cloud.
And you put people in the lanes with it too, is that you've got half your workers that are downloading Office apps for enterprise, and they've got them installed, and they double click a desktop icon. But with the F3s, you don't get the installed apps. Everything is the web version, which we've been talking a lot about here. But that is a major shift, especially for someone that's coming from on-premises, or maybe they already had a license to download the apps, and you're shifting them into the other boat. People lose their minds when we tell them that, and it is a huge shift if you're used to double-clicking an icon and getting that whole app. I think that this will change quite a bit, looking at what they've been doing with the current standing apps, is they are containerizing them, and they're getting a lot more like the web versions.
Yep.
So I think that this will change quite a bit. But another thing to take into consideration too is the amount of files that comes with it, and the amount of mailbox storage that comes with it. And I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, that is shared as well, correct?
Yes. So one of the things to keep in mind is, again, we have some people in organizations that, like I said, if you can work from an iPad and you're doing minor touches and interfaces, you're getting emailed a work order and you pull it up on your iPad, you respond to a Teams chat on your iPad, and you're driving a utility truck, whatever, this is going to be fine for you. You works great. But it's the people that are on the bubble in the middle, the ones where we think, ooh, if we can get them licensed at an $8 a month level, we're going to save so much money.
And where that also gets pricey too is, so if you move someone over and they're like, oh, well, we need to give them more mailbox size, or we need to give them a little bit more OneDrive sizes, then you start adding on licenses, and then you're getting closer and closer to $36 a month. And then it becomes, well, why don't we just put them on the E3 at this point then? In fact, I've seen customers add on so many pieces that they got above the E3 level license, and Microsoft's not going to tell you to stop.
Oh, they're going to let you do
Yep.
it. They're going to let you do it. I mean, this is one of those things where, okay, so I've got my person on the bubble. So you get 1 gigabyte of Outlook mailbox. That's how big your mailbox can be. Okay. So you may have someone who's on the bubble, kind of a frontline worker, kind of an information worker. Now, as Scott mentioned, you're going to have to give them an exchange online, plan 1 or something like that so that they can have a bigger mailbox, right? Okay, got them that. The next limitation is OneDrive. So I think it's just two gigs on OneDrive, right? So I think that's it for OneDrive. So we'll get you off your H drive into OneDrive. Well, if they've worked at your company for a very long time, they might have more than 2 gigabytes of stuff in their home drive that would then go to OneDrive. And of course, maybe you could do a bolt-on for that, and a bolt-on for another limitation, and a bolt-on for another limitation. And Microsoft definitely will let you spend the money. So, be wary of that. But I think the bigger thing is the effort, right? You can get your company on the cloud, but I just will say, like, I wish I had some sort of, way to help people understand that in order to save that much money, you're going to probably need to spend that much transforming the way you work, migrating data to the cloud. Not to say that you can't make it work. I've seen companies be successful with F-level licensing, but the two factors that I usually see are the determining factor is, one, these are true F3 workers. They work from an iPad. They maybe sign in on a browser to check their
They work
web
at a grocery
mail,
store, and they're really just checking email at the break room computer, and everything else is done at a cash register. Or they work in retail, and they're logging in for their shift. They're checking their email. Maybe they need to get a Teams message on their phone, but they're not saving a lot of files and creating documents. So like you've been saying, it's very important to just understand who the target audience is for those frontline worker type licenses and who is not. And if you are on the edge and you can't tell the difference, are they information or are they frontline? They're probably not frontline.
Yeah, and I will say this. Remember, if you're on the bubble and you do file interactions or file transactions with people in that E3, E5 area, sure, we can get you on F3.
Yep.
I can show you how to use Word online and store files online. But remember, we've got that group of people that can basically work oblivious to the cloud. They don't have to really change the way that they're working. So my suggestion to every organization going into this, and one, I don't want to be, calling anyone out, because again, I've worked with lots of organizations that have struggled with this level of adoption. And some of it is a little bit like, hey, just remember, everyone, I hate not the players, because that $8 carrot gets dangled in front of us. And if you're someone who's had to make these types of licensing purchases and spend millions of dollars, if you think you can save $1 million, you're probably going to try and do it.
Yep.
But you have to say, the barrier to entry is, I am prepared to move everyone off of the F drive, the H drive, the Elemental P drive. We are prepared to leave the data center and go to Microsoft's data center, because that's where we see it hum, and that's where it works.
Yep.
But those are the types of things. So a couple of myths that I see, people think, all right, I got Scott an F3 license. He'll just double click on a file on his desktop, and instead of opening in Word on his computer, it'll just open in the web. Nope. It will not. It has to be in OneDrive or SharePoint in order for Word to talk to files.
In fact, if you don't have Word installed and you try to open that file, it won't even know what to do. It'll say, open it in another application, and there you go. That's a help desk call, because no one wants to edit their documents in Notepad or WordPad.
Right. And we've seen people do some really convoluted crap with it,
Mm-hmm.
right? I'll upload the file to OneDrive, make changes, and then I'll download it and then, put it on a drive, or I'll email it to the person and then they'll put it on the drive. And suddenly we have dismantled the magic of built-in versioning, real-time co-authoring, all of those things. So I guess the moral of the story, and one of the reasons why I should take a sip from my F3 tea. The reason that I do this is really to save people from the heartache of having to back out and just start doling out E3
Yep.
licenses, and really just saying, like, you can do this, but you have to be ready to move off your data center file wise. I know people have like applications and other things running in their data center, but you've got to be ready to go, and you've got to be ready to let go of those drives. We've helped tons of people through these types of data migrations and moves, and it's not easy and it's not fast, but it can be done.
Yep.
You can do this. I had a customer say recently to me, if we were all online, I could have an F3 license. And I'm like, probably true with an asterisk, again, around mailbox size and data storage size. But it really does say, like, if you're in the cloud and you're ready to adopt it, then yes, anyone could technically just work from the web all day.
Yep.
But it's really that network storage really holds people back from being able to realize the magic that is the F3 license, and really making sure that you're truly giving it to people that it makes sense for them.
Yeah, and I think an important starting place with it too is understanding the different personas within your organization. And if you work with an
Yes.
MSP, or you have an internal department, or even if you're looking for help with that, Virteva does that, is we offer persona-based workshops where we'll actually sit
Yep.
down and try and better understand, hey, where do all these different departments fit? What are their roles and responsibilities? And then we'll try to
Right.
identify them as frontline workers, and then we'll guide you towards the appropriate level of licensing, and even tell you about, like, well, here's the caveats and here's the add-ons that you can do to get around those one or two
Yep.
people that have been with the company for 30 years and they have an 80 gigabyte mailbox size. Because when you move someone from someone with that mailbox size doing F3, and they log in, is they just start getting errors and pop-ups saying that they
Yeah.
can't get to their stuff because they're not licensed for it, and it becomes a real headache. It happened to us a couple of years ago.
Yeah, and this is just one of those things where, again, it's not to say, you've made a bad decision.
Mhm.
It's just sort of like saying you don't have the whole story. So it's the same thing with, back to the Chromebook analogy. You know what? If you are eyes open and you understand, this isn't really a laptop. It's more of a, it's a box that I can use a web browser through. But as long as I have Google Drive and Google Docs and Google Sheets, and I understand that I don't have a C drive,
Mhm.
and I understand that I'm sort of cloud forward. It makes sense. And yes, you could get away with using that $275 laptop.
Yep.
But just remember,
I mean,
it's
I'm
not a
I'm not a
laptop.
big supporter of people going out and buying Chromebooks because they are underpowered machines. But if you fit the right persona, a Chromebook and an F3 license can really save
Right.
you a lot of money. It just
Yeah.
might start to fall apart in a few years.
Yeah, I mean, but that's the thing, is that, maybe it's sort of that, like, if it seems too good to be true, it probably is, type of situation.
Mhm.
There's a reason that it jumps from $36 to $8. You have to
Yep.
understand, you're losing a lot of that capability. But it is nice to be able to not over license your frontline workers. I think that SKU needs to exist, but I just want people to go into it with better understanding, and really understanding that in order to make it work, you aren't going to get away with just giving it to a few people and giving everyone else, E3s, that your entire organization has to be ready to transform away from on-premises storage,
Yep.
in order to make it
Make it worth its while.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yep. All right, Holly, you feeling good? You think you can get off your soapbox on your F3 licenses? All right, this has been a long time coming for the audience. Holly's had this as a flagged email in my inbox for a number of months. I'm glad that we
man.
finally had the conversation on it.
It's therapeutic. It was therapeutic. I appreciate it. I feel like a weight has been lifted.
All right. So while we were talking to, I also previewed kind of on screen there the enterprise license comparison guide that is very helpful. I'll include that in the show notes as well. Microsoft
Absolutely.
updates that PDF usually monthly with any changes or additions to services, but that'll really kind of help you look across all the different license SKUs and understand what you're getting, what you're not, and where those kind of footnotes that you need to understand are. All right. So let's wrap up the show here. Again, I wanted to thank everyone for joining us for a conversation on Outlook and licensing and Copilot and everything that we talked about today. If you have any questions on any of those pieces or anything else Microsoft 365 related, you can contact Virteva. We are a leading managed service partner and provider with Microsoft, and we can help you with all your IT needs. You can email us at letstalk@virteva.com or visit our website at www.virteva.com. If you want even more Microsoft news, you can sign up for our Microsoft 365 newsletter by visiting our website. The newsletter recaps a handful of topics month over month to kind of keep you in the loop on recent news, announcements on a much kind of smaller time scale. So if you want that to pop up at the beginning of the month in your inbox, sign up for that and you'll get kind of a very short version of this podcast on a monthly basis. Thanks again for tuning in. Again, if you tuned in on either our audio only listen or on our YouTube version of the podcast through our playlist, please remember to leave us a like and subscribe. And once again, thanks for tuning in and have a great rest of your day. Take it easy. Oh, go Bills.